Starsky gets poisoned, and he and Hutch have 24 hours to find the perp and save him. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike and he's Rick.
I am Rick. Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about 70s action classic Starsky and Hutch. And you can tell we're
what a
amped
show.
up. What a show. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I had never watched it.
Oh, really?
And yet, I was, it was just like Kojak, like completely aware of it as a kid. Like a very young kid. I mean, it had toys, of course, but everybody knew who Starsky and Hutch were. It's not even a kid's show. There's nothing about it that it's a kid's show. And it was like a 10 o'clock show, right?
It's totally inappropriate for kids.
Yes.
And it was a 10 o'clock show most of its run, yes.
Why were there toys?
I don't know. And actually, I have a children's book of Starsky and Hutch. It's almost like a sort of the format of a little golden book, but in a larger sort of soft paperback.
Yeah.
And, it's like a cop story, for kids.
Is Huggy Bear a bear in it?
He's not. It's not quite that not quite that juvenile, but yeah, it's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a pretty, and I'm not being facetious, it's a pretty edgy show in terms of content, not just the violence, but the things they're dealing with. Yeah,
there's crime, there's social issues, all kinds of stuff. It is remarkable. Yeah, I didn't really watch it much as a kid, but I do remember it being on in reruns, I think on one of the New York stations. And I remember it being on. I didn't really seek it out much. And then years later, was when I kind of watched it a little bit. And actually, I kind of went through and was watching some of it when they started showing up on streaming. I started watching it a while ago and then kind of got back into it when we knew we were going to do it this season.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the movie. I bet I would have enjoyed it more if I had seen some of the show. I mean, I might have seen it. I sort of remember the whole where they put the siren on the top of the car. But that was about it again.
In many ways, it seemed to me like a car show.
Yes.
It had car chases, and I did watch Dukes of Hazzard, which is kind of a car show, but I wasn't into a lot of the other car shows at the time, I think. Yeah. And maybe that's why I didn't get into Starsky, for so long.
Yeah, but really it's a show about relationships.
Sure is.
Friendship.
Yeah, and, you mentioning the movie. When I first started, kind of diving into the show, actually, my first reaction was to resent the movie a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because I was watching, a lot of the earlier episodes and thinking, they just made a big goof of the show, and it's kind of disrespectful. They didn't really need to do that. Yeah. But then the more I watch the show, it's like, well, in many ways, the show itself was kind of spoofing things in some respects. It didn't take itself too seriously all the time. So maybe that's okay. But I still think they went a little bit over the top with the way they did the movie.
Yeah. Well, and the early seasons have genuine humor that doesn't need to be made fun of. They're just genuinely entertaining, and the vibe of it is not particularly cheesy. I mean, some of the storylines we're going to talk, they're really only 3 or 4 stories, but and I mean it's the 70s, so some of the clothes, but it's pretty well made, and we'll get into it more, but especially Starsky and Hutch, that Paul Michael Glaser and David Soul are really, I think, quite good acting-wise. And
they are.
The other actors too, but them in particular.
We can talk about the tone of a show, and there's a clear dividing line, the first couple of seasons and the second couple of seasons, and I think even the most hardcore fans would acknowledge that it became a different show, and admittedly became a different show. But I also think it's easy to look back at a series and just kind of look at everything in black and white. Mm-hmm. When it was a little bit edgier, it still had lots of moments of humor, and by the same token, as they get into some more outlandish plots and things like that, and a little bit more almost campy, there were still moments of very good writing and still just some of that grit from their first season. So it wasn't as simple as they flipped on a switch and it became a totally different show.
Yeah, and by every count, I see it was the actors pushing it to go in a slightly less gritty direction.
Right, and it was Starsky and Hutch became sort of the poster boy for violence on television at some point. I was reading an interesting article from 1977 from our friend Tom Shales from the Washington Post. It was about like all these, there was this, congregation of interest groups protesting violence on television and singling out programs like Starsky and Hutch. And there was a big survey that ranked the most violent shows on television. And Tom Shales got some quotes from Aaron Spelling, who said, the violence is going to go out of the show, period. We're not going to be violent, And then he sort of hedged on that later in the article and said, well, he doesn't want television to become pap, and he wants to be able to explore all aspects of society. But he's sending a clear signal to everybody that the show is going to change. And it seems like in large part there was a drastic change due to pressure from interest groups.
Yeah, and Paul Michael Glaser.
Yes. Well, let me mention here too. This is another Aaron Spelling show. We did Heart to Heart earlier this season. I remember picking up a used copy of Aaron Spelling's memoir, A Primetime Life, co-written with Jefferson Graham, and thinking, wow, I'm going to get the inside scoop on a lot of these shows. But the Starsky and Hutch section really shows how shallow and lacking the book is, because many of the most interesting things about Starsky and Hutch are not even brought up. He maybe talks about the show for a couple pages. He talks about what Paul Michael Glaser and David Soul did after Starsky and Hutch, and there's a couple of pages of script, dialogue examples from scripts, which is pointless and something that appears throughout the book. But he does not talk at all about, the anti-violence protests. He does not talk at all about Paul Michael Glaser's conflicted role being part of the show and threatening to leave it and coming back and things like that. He doesn't even talk about how it seems like the movie Busting with Elliot Gould and Robert Blake, a sort of a buddy cop movie, seemed to be a clear inspiration for Starsky and Hutch. Of course, there's no mention of that either. So many of the most compelling parts of Starsky and Hutch, the things that you would want to read about in a book talking about Starsky and Hutch, not even mentioned at all by Aaron Spelling.
Well, I'm glad he talked about what the actors did afterwards on things that had nothing to do with him.
Yeah. He did say something about working with David Soul again. And David Soul had a pretty checkered past after Starsky and Hutch too.
And Paul Michael Glaser, we should point out, directed the episode of Miami Vice we talked about. Smuggler's Blues.
Forgotten that. Yeah, he became a prolific television director.
Yeah, and some cinema opportunities too. But I find it interesting that from my point of view, that the actors seemed to push it in a direction where it wasn't as interesting. But I guess to them it was. Also interesting that there was a contingency plan if he left for one of the seasons to have his brother take over because they were stuck with the title.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a way to go. I think there was another season 3, there was a contingency plan for a female cop.
Yeah, and they actually brought her on one episode and then kind of abandoned that idea. But there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than one might think.
Right. Can I tell you a goofy thing? I was watching an episode you told me, a season 4 episode you told me to watch, the Starsky versus Hutch. And I noticed one of the uniform cops, the patch just said BCPD, and I'd never heard them refer to the name of the city. So I decided that it meant Big City PD.
I like that.
I do too. It's better than Bay City, frankly.
Yeah. It took me quite a while to realize that it was Bay City, that it wasn't just Los Angeles.
Right, yeah.
I'm not quite sure what went into that decision. But
I don't know.
But that's one thing. There was some good location shooting for the series.
Yeah. Definitely gritty there, too.
Yeah, I think Lori, watching the show with me, was kind of commenting on how dirty a lot of it seemed, like just the show, and some of the streets that they're driving down and stuff, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank one of our listeners, David, who kind of we Starsky and Hutch was always on the list, but he actually posted some pictures of some Starsky and Hutch custom figures he had a while back, and I think that inspired us. It really solidified us to go ahead and make sure we got it in this season. And he's got a podcast of his own. It's called the Atari 5200 Podcast, going back, looking at some of the classic games of that video system. Yeah, we encourage you to check that out and give it a listen.
Yeah, and those customs are really cool.
Yeah, that's some excellent work on that.
I mean, anybody who has a Captain Dobie custom.
Right.
So that's a winner in my book.
Yeah, Starsky and Hutch is one thing, but Dobie is next level doing one of those. So.
I think we were emailing about him or something. Did you say he might be the quintessential black police captain?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if I don't think he's actually said he's too old for anything like that, too old for this, but he seems to be, the quintessential, I think, probably the main source of inspiration for all others that came after him. And it's great.
It is.
I don't know. I haven't seen too many Dobie episodes. I don't know if there's more to his character. I don't think there is. And I'm fine with it. I just like him, being cranky, but a great cop,
Yeah, and he cares about
and committed to his job and committed to the guys.
And
but yeah, I do enjoy Bernie Hamilton. Yes. is Captain Dobie's great.
He's committed to plaid jackets.
Yeah. That is right.
And then there's, of course, the car. So we mentioned the big striped tomato.
Yeah. And, I actually have a Corgi replica that I purchased recently. I'll put a picture of it in the show notes, but it's great here. From the TV series Starsky and Hutch, it's got pictures of them, and it's got like a little cardboard stand-up like thing of the two cops next to the car, like in the package. Oh. So you see the Gran Torino, and it says on it, detailed scale model Ford Gran Torino for the adult collector. Ah. So make no mistake, this one is for the adult collector.
Yeah.
Copyright 2002.
Do the cardboard guys look to scale with the car?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Pretty much. I hadn't opened this up yet, so I think it's cardboard or some other like similar material. It's like some kind of like a standee kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the photo reproduction on them is very, very sharp. That's very cool. Yeah, I very much enjoy this that I got after we had decided to do Starsky and Hutch, but obviously before we actually did talk about it. So this is a great part of my collection.
Yeah, I feel like, I can't remember for sure, but I think some kid might have had the Mego version of the car when I was a kid. It was either that or the emergency truck, which I don't know if those were Mego, but I know there were emergency toys too, which makes more sense.
As a car, it doesn't look all that appealing to me.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's funny, too, that these guys drive around in such a conspicuous vehicle.
Yes, yeah. On YouTube, someone had posted the documentary that came with the DVDs. So I watched that, and it's
I gotta check that out.
And the creator of the show, William Blinn, said he had a green Camaro with a white stripe and sold it for some reason and regretted selling it. But so he put it in the script thinking, he'd get a chance to kind of, in a way, have it again. But GM wasn't the provider of cars for the show, so or the original TV movie. It was Ford. So they got the Gran Torino, and the transportation people painted it that way. And everyone who talked about it in the documentary said that, it was just a standard car, so it really wasn't that exciting a car either. Other than the tires, the bigger tires, but it didn't have like a souped up engine or anything, and it was kind of a pain to drive. But that was a fun reason for it being there. Yes, it's ridiculous that sometimes they're referred to as undercover, but all the criminals know who they are anyway. So I don't even know what their beat is really.
Yeah,
is it just general crime?
Yeah, it's almost like they're a 2-person like task force or whatever.
Yeah,
like just like special missions, and
right.
It seems like they've got free reign to choose their cases, which is funny. Considering how aggravated Dobie gets if they go off book at the same time.
I mean, there are a lot of, I guess they do drug busts and, other vice kind of related things, but they also solve some murders.
Right.
A lot of times they're just solving who's trying to kill them.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because they are two of the most unpopular guys in the area in Bay City. And the undercover aspect goes all throughout the series, really. Mm-hmm. Because there's, just some of the other episodes there. I think like the pro wrestling episode that I watched a long time ago, I think is in the 3rd or 4th season. So.
Yeah. Which one of them goes undercover as a wrestler?
David Soul, I think.
Okay.
Hutch, like the Golden Angel or something like that.
See, yeah, that is silly, but cool.
Yeah.
But silly.
Yes.
It's like in the pilot movie. I mean, they're trying to solve who's trying to kill them. And they do an actual just like drug thing. There's a scene where they're trying to track down who's got the hit out on them, and they like go into some seedy bar, like a all criminal bar, and just bust heads a little bit. And, and then they find our friend Michael Lerner.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, Michael Lerner.
Yes, the late Michael Lerner, who actually was in several of the early episodes and could have been a pretty decent recurring character, I think, and they got rid of him.
Was he always the same? Fat Raleigh?
Yeah. I think it was the same character showed up multiple times. Oh. But I guess there's only so many times they could rough him up and threaten him.
Right.
And then release him, kind of like do catch and release stuff. I guess you can only do that so many times. Although there's the whole story of how Huggy Bear manages to get so much information without, being threatened. Well, I guess he was threatened, but,
Yeah, there's at least one episode where, I saw in the episode descriptions where someone's trying to kill him.
Yeah, which it makes sense because he's clearly... I mean, that's the other thing is a lot of these episodes, it semes like people snitching to Starsky and Hutch is like an open secret. It doesn't seem like people, get away with that for very long.
They put up a good front. Yeah. We're not going to... No. They wait till they get punched.
Yeah. I mean, despite all this, though, I mean,
Yes.
I had a great time watching the show.
Me too.
And it does have like a lot of cop cliches, and I do think like in a way the show was a reaction to a lot of those cop cliches that even in the mid-70s had become routine in many ways, but they do some interesting things with it.
Well, in one of those Academy interviews, Paul Michael Glaser kind of talks about how TV producers back then were happy to have a formula, including on this show.
Yeah.
The art was not a big part of the decision. Commerce was much more the driving force, and if they could find something that worked, they were happy. Whereas he and David Soul, being sort of boomer artist types, had other things in mind.
Yeah, and that's understandable for everybody concerned.
Yeah. So I guess some of the, like you said, some of the maybe commentary on the cliches might have just been coming from the performances as much as anything. On the other hand, he also lamented the idea of writers being in charge of, like he said something, but there weren't writing producers back then. Thank God.
Oh, that's funny. I was looking at, which I'll put this in the show notes as well, but the Starsky and Hutch capsule in the fall preview for, I guess, the 1974 fall preview. And it's interesting. It's very, like, condescending. It's sort of like it starts out by describing a scene that's happening and, like, including, like, stage direction has in italics, and then a quote. Starsky's slug hits him in the chest. He falls across the stretcher, belly down. And then, it describes this, like, really violent shootout scene. And then it says, and another Spelling Goldberg production comes to its happy end in the proud tradition of such other morality plays as The Mod Squad, The Rookies, and SWAT. It really doesn't seem to think much of the show. No. It just seems like it's another run-of-the-mill violent, cop show without much going for it, which is interesting. It just seems like there was very low expectations for this when it came out.
I'm thinking it's just interesting. I guess maybe all the protests about violence turned spelling towards other avenues.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, if you don't like that, wait till you see Charlie's Angels.
Yeah. I think like across all of his shows he kind of changed it. So I guess Charlie's Angels would have been on still at the time. I don't know. Maybe the transition show was T.J. Hooker.
Yeah, the fully checking out of cop shows.
Yeah, I've got still a little bit more to say about the cop show, and T.J. Hooker will be my vehicle to do so.
Haven't done beat cops in a while.
Yeah.
Let's get down there. They're not rookies. Well, maybe Adrian Zemed and Heather Locklear were at first.
You learn fast when you're on the beat with T.J. Hooker.
That's right. Punch first, ask questions later.
Yeah.
Running, hold on to your hairpiece.
That's sometimes the attitude of Starsky and Hutch, too. They're very proactive cops. They are, in kind of that 70s way. I mean, the 70s were sort of an era where people were rethinking, you had Serpico and talk about the police corruption and kind of getting mainstreamed in pop culture and everything. And Starsky and Hutch comes squarely down on the side of, these are two good cops, and they, sometimes they're the target of internal affairs, and sometimes they bust bad cops. Mm-hmm. The show presents it as, okay, most of the cops are good ones, and the bad ones will get caught out eventually by guys like Starsky and Hutch. But and they might bend some rules a little bit. In this very episode that we're going to talk about, they kind of have some fun with that a little bit. But they're doing it for good reasons.
And as much as real life, I don't like cops running around punching people and other things. It's often quite hilarious when they're doing it.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, and this is from season 1, and the opening credits are really just them punching people and blowing things up and stuff.
Right. And there's something satisfying about that, too. I mean, good versus bad and getting criminals off the streets. I mean, yeah, people were, sort of rethinking notions of, police work back then, but they're also dealing with massive amounts of crime in some big cities. So, yeah, that wasn't something to take lightly.
And like, I really enjoy the physicality of their acting. I think especially Glazer's, even there's, you can see part of this in these credits, and I think in later seasons too, but the whole scene, there's a scene in the pilot where two guys are following them, and they, stop them and kind of slam them against the car, and Starsky actually jumps on, bends over the guy and jumps on his back on the hood, and there's just there's a looseness to it all that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think if you just watch the credits, you would think that this was a totally ridiculous, over-the-top show.
Right.
And then once you actually get in and watch the episodes, you see that there's a lot more going on. And really, the acting and the writing both are very good in a lot of the episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
That it's not just a total circus.
Right.
But you can definitely see elements that would be ripe for send-ups, by those opening credits, because those are a little bit over the top.
Yes. And so in season 1, there's a to me, it's the best for theme song, the Lalo Schifrin theme song. And there's a different one in season 2, which I guess is the most famous one. And then season 3 has a different one, and season 4 has a different version of the season 2 one or something. It's very confusing. But season 1 is it's Lalo Schifrin, is what you'd expect.
Yeah, I say just stick with the season 1.
Yeah.
Would be my opinion.
Yeah. So come baddie time. Again, we might have some questions about that. But
yes.
So should we veer into this episode here?
I think we should, yeah. I think some other stuff will come up as we go along. But we decided to look at A Coffin for Starsky, the 21st episode of the first season. And this premiered March 3rd, 1976. On a Wednesday night. And I was mistaken earlier. I said it was the 1974 TV Guide Fall Preview. It was actually the 1975 Fall Preview because Starsky and Hutch was on ABC 1975 through 1979, 4 seasons and 93 episodes, including that pilot that Mike has referenced. And it was mostly a 10 o'clock show. Started out Wednesdays at 10. In the middle, it did Tuesdays at 10. In the middle, it was on like Saturdays at 9 p.m. for a while, but mostly a 10 o'clock show on weeknights. On this particular night, now this is just a great example of this mid-70s era, what's going to be on this Wednesday night. So CBS had Tony Orlando and Dawn, a nice variety show, at 8 o'clock, and Jerry Lewis and Ann Mira were among the guests. 9 p.m., Cannon, another detective show there. And 10 o'clock, another cop show, The Blue Knight, with George Kennedy, I believe. ABC had The Bionic Woman with guest star Forrest Tucker. At 9 o'clock, Beretta, and among the guest cast in this episode that aired on March 3rd, 1976, Tommy Lee Jones and Eric Estrada. So that sounds like an interesting episode of Beretta. And Starsky and Hutch closing the night on ABC at 10 o'clock. NBC had, at 8 o'clock, Little House on the Prairie, and this is a really good episode. I don't know if we talked about it when we discussed Little House on the Prairie, but it's called The Long Road Home. And it's sort of like the Wages of Fear episode with Mr. Edwards and Charles transporting like dynamite explosives across these like dangerous mountain pass and everything. So that's kind of an exciting episode.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
And 9 o'clock, Chico and the Man. 9:30, The Dumplings. This was a show about fat people. I mean, that was kind of like the gimmick of it, with James Coco, as I think their name was actually Dumpling, I think. And they had a diner or something like that.
Well, if I were going to cast anybody as a dumpling, I think James Coco would be it.
Yeah.
Especially back then. But sounds like a weird idea.
Yeah, and it didn't really work. And then at 10 o'clock on NBC, the series finale of Petrocelli, which was Barry Newman as a lawyer in the Southwest, the recently departed Barry Newman. And that was the last episode of the series on NBC. So that's what we had. Wednesday night, March 3rd, 1976.
It's a lot of crime.
It really is, yeah. Now I'm looking back at it.
A lot of crime time, something like that.
Yeah, and Starsky and Hutch was dominating its time slot. In its first season, it was pretty much cleaning up.
So this episode, as you said, a coffin for Starsky. It opens up and it's very kind of unsettling. Like there are weird camera angles and Starsky is mumbling some stuff. I think he keeps saying, I can't. The first shot of who we see of him, he's in bed, but we see it in the mirror on the ceiling of his bed. We
1970s.
Yes, swinging bachelor. And he's being drugged by a guy with a stocking over his head who's laughing a lot, and he tells him, you have 24 hours to live, pig. And the guy leaves, and Starsky falls out of bed, and he manages to pull the phone down by him and call Hutch and just wheeze out, Hutch.
Yeah, now
help.
911 wasn't a thing universally back then, but it's still kind of telling that he calls Hutch is what he,
Right, yeah.
And it's kind of like to a modern audience too, though, seeing him fumble around to dial 7 numbers or whatever.
Yeah.
You're kind of thinking, man, just dial 911.
At least he had a touch tone.
Yeah, that's true. Thank goodness for that.
Ambulance with Hutch in it and takes Starsky to the hospital, and Sidney Pollack is his doctor. That would have been something. That would have been a coup.
Yeah, it sure would have been.
Yeah. But the doctor takes Hutch out in the hall and gives him a pretty dire diagnosis that it's unlikely that they're going to figure out how to deal with this poison, that assuming it's doing what it's said to do, it's going to take about 24 hours. But, they would have to figure out what it is, and then I think they have to figure out the exact amount so that they can neutralize it. And it doesn't look good. And also, Starsky had asked him to tell Hutch this news because, he hates soapy scenes. So Hutch goes back in and kind of asking Starsky some questions, and it seems like he was drugged before he was poisoned. So that's why he was already all in a weird state. And he just remembers the guy's dirty laugh. But he thinks it's somebody he knows. Even though he's not doing great, they think they can find an answer quicker than the doctor can. So they're going to go out and start trying to trying to find the truth. And the doctor can keep working on it as much as he can there. But Starsky, meanwhile, is upset that Hutch forgot to bring his pants.
Yeah.
Which is weird because he was wearing pants pajama pants when he fell out of the bed. So
that's right.
But it's still funny how upset he is about it.
Yeah, he gives him a little speech, like the indignation.
Right.
The indignation of not necessarily of just being without pants, but the indignation of Hutch expecting him to go out there without his pants.
Yes.
It's well played. It's funny.
It is. Yeah. And he's walking kind of funny. I mean, it's not like a paper hospital gown, but he is still walking kind of funny when they're in the hallway.
Yes, and in the scene earlier, I think it was like 3:58. They established that this is a clock episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we got 24 hours, and when he was making the phone call, they established the time, and they do a good job of showing clocks throughout the episode. So yeah, we got 24 hours, and then Starsky himself says give us till like 10 p.m. And if we can't, get it by then you can take over and run your tests and everything.
Right. So then they're on their way in to the office, and yet again, in an Aaron Spelling show, we have someone driving who probably shouldn't be.
That's right. At least, Hutch actually asks him, I guess, hey, should I drive,
Yeah. And that's when they spot Huggy standing on the corner, right? Just hanging out, and they ask him to look into things, and he's got a new job as a travel agent. But he'll check things out. Also, they had called in, and Hutch sort of yelled at one of the people to get all the files from all their cases for the last 5 years.
Yeah, which with them is a lot of cases.
And the guy is obviously a little annoyed. He's got other things to do.
Yeah, he's probably annoyed that he's working the desk anyway. Yeah. This travel agent angle is interesting. I wonder if if anything will come of that later.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Probably just a random thing they put in there.
Yeah. I thought he was a restaurateur. Why does he need a travel agent job? Yeah. Did his restaurant blow up or something? Yeah. Then there's a scene where they're looking through files in Dobie's office. And Dobie and the cop they yelled at actually have used the computer to kind of narrow things down to get some suspects out of there. After they figure out, well, they know it's a man. They think he's white, a certain age group. So they're able to kind of get a lot of people out of there.
And the laugh. I wonder if that's like a big part of their criminal files is
just
like
laughs.
Yeah, they get fingerprints. They have guys turn, for a picture, and then they have them laugh and comment on it on their profile.
Right. It's all on a Joker scale.
Yeah, yeah.
How many Jokers? And then this police scientist Cheryl comes in. It's interesting because throughout all of her appearances, there's this sense of a backstory. But they don't, for reasons, they don't really reveal it till the end. And at first I was kind of like, well, why are they giving time to this? Or is this something I should know from another episode? But then in retrospect, I actually liked it because it was more real than the typical people who know the things they're talking about, laying out exposition for us.
Yes. Now, I will say, I think they do. I think it is well written. Yeah. Now, I will say that Lori was like half watching this episode as I had it on, and right away she figured out what was going on. So they did telegraph it, I guess, to people that have watched a lot of television.
Yeah,
that could possibly pick up on it.
But in this scene, she explains that the doctors are able to isolate a couple of the chemicals, and it seems like it's a neurotoxin that over the course of it is going to cause problems with Starsky's nervous system and symptoms like perspiration, distorted vision, and coordination problems, difficulty breathing, and finally a coma, and then, finally after that, death. But when she was listing these, for some reason, it was reminding me of like those Looney Tunes, where someone, where Bugs is, I think it's Bugs telling someone they have some sort of disease.
Oh yeah,
like spots and stuff.
And they start experiencing it like in real, like right there. Yeah. Like one at a time.
But anyway, Hutch mentioned Cheryl's father, who's some sort of chemist, but she's going to try, but he doesn't want to see her for some reason. There's some issue there. So Dobie comes back, and they've now got it down from, they had reduced it to 20 possible and got that down to 3 primes. I assume means prime suspect. Got Vic Bellamy, a pornographer. Wait, no, he's not the pornographer. Yeah, Vic Bellamy, a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Some kind.
Wrong vice, but yes.
Al Waddell, also a drug dealer. He was a big dealer of H. And Janos Martini, who's the pornographer and domestic abuser. They only have an address on Bellamy, so he's their first stop. And this is kind of ridiculous. Like they knock, and they're not getting an answer, so they're worried he's going to go out the back, so they just kick down the door, and He's there. He's got a big cast on his leg. It's been broken for 4 weeks. His girlfriend confirms that, and then they just leave with a very mild apology.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
He doesn't even like throw her like a 20 to repair to the door or anything.
Right. And then on the way out, Starsky stumbles, and he's already perspiring too. And they call into Adobe, and Cheryl's found some supply houses that are a match for one of the things. So at least there's that. But still, Hutch starts yelling at Adobe, and Adobe kind of yells back. And then Starsky takes the radio and talks to Adobe, and then I like this throughout. Hutch is being very emotional, and Starsky's like, don't do this to the people who are helping us. But he asks Hutch if he wants to apologize. Hutch is like, let's not get sickening.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really good stuff, and it is kind of like a twist on the usual thing where a lot of times Starsky's the more hot-headed one, and Hutch is kind of like the more reserved one.
But then Adobe suggests, well, do you have an address on Martini's ex, Sweet Alice? So they do, and they go find her, and I guess, Sweet Alice is a pro. Yes. They say. Because the guy's... Hutch is at the back, and Starsky's knocking on the door. It's like a apartment with an outdoor exit, and first floor. Anyway, there's a guy sneaking out the back, and then Hutch climbs in the window, and she tells him in a very odd Southern accent that Martini has a new company called Sexational Films, and she kind of tells him where it is, or the general area.
If I could just make a comment here.
Please,
one thing I miss about 1970s Los Angeles, even though I was never in there, is the preponderance of like all these like garden apartments and just like sort of swing single apartments that always have like outdoor pools and everything. Is that even a thing anymore? I
don't know.
Like, it seems like, especially in Starsky and Hutch, always makes good use of that setting. Yeah. But it just seemed like for a while, like if you watch TV, you get the sense that like every apartment out there, they all have some kind of like communal pool where everybody hangs out.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, out there it might be. Pools are a big thing.
Yeah.
It's hot,
It is. But, it also takes up a lot of space.
That's true. I mean, this building looks like a building that has been in a million TV shows.
Yeah, I think like this building was probably been used on the show before.
Yeah, probably. I felt like maybe it was like in that Columbo we did.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I could be wrong. I'm sure there were at least hundreds of those out there. So they show the outside of this soundstage, and it just has a cardboard sign on it telling people to go around the back. And they're like two toughs waiting by the back door, and they're not impressed by Starsky and Hutch's badges.
No, they're not.
They're like, do you have a warrant? And Hutch is like, well, you're right. We need probable cause. Like, I don't know, like stupid here, taking a swing. And Starsky's like, well, which one are you calling stupid? And Hutch says something like the creepy one. Anyway, they agitate him enough so that they both take swings, and then
these guys have this kind of thing down to a T by now.
Yes, yeah,
they're very good at it.
Also, Starsky calls them flakes.
Yeah,
just like because he uses it again later.
That's right, yeah.
Like flakes. And then after they beat them up on their way into the building, he calls them turkeys. But then he doubles over. He's got stomach pains, worse than when his Aunt Rose sent him chicken soup. Oh. But he pulls it together. Then we go inside before they come in, and there's a shoot underway, which that just even implying that seems edgy. But I felt like they implied what was going to happen. There was a lot for a 70s network show.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right.
But more exciting, Starsky and Hutch just walking and knocking everything over.
Yeah.
Lights and what passes for walls.
Yeah.
And then really kind of roughing up this Martini guy. And they they're trying to make him laugh. They want to hear his laugh.
And of course, the best way to make somebody laugh is to intimidate them and threaten to destroy expensive equipment that they're stressed out about.
That's right.
Because, some of the best laughter comes out of tension.
Yes. They should have tickled him. Got one of the girls, the actresses, tickle him or something. Yeah. Get over here. Tickle him. Anyway, his laugh doesn't match once he works one up. And then back outside, we know they have 12 hours have passed already. And they have like a tender moment. As they say in a lot of the things I was watching, these guys weren't afraid to be emotional with each other.
No. And that is something that Aaron Spelling talks about in his book. That's one of the things he was proudest of. Uh-huh. he highlights like a specific episode, I think, where they sort of have that kind of emotion, and to him that was the heart of the show for him.
Yeah.
And I guess really the relationship is definitely the heart of the show.
Yeah, I guess there was consternation from some people back then about that, but it seems fine.
That's right.
Looking back, it just seems like, oh, these guys care about each other. What's the big deal?
Right. And it sort of irritates me in the sense that, like, can't you just have a show about two guys that are like really good friends?
Yeah.
And it does stand out, though, because it was kind of rare to have people be, that. Now, the later seasons sort of, lean into some of the coding, you might say.
Uh-huh.
And some of the stuff that the movie really kind of goofed on. And then there's I think the next to last episode I told you about is really kind of preposterous. And the ending of that, it's almost like they're
yes.
It's almost like they're looking at the camera and saying, "Yep, everything you thought about is true. So what?" But the more I read about the show, the more I think that they just probably were doing it as a goof.
Yeah. And frankly, my memory of the gags and that movie, even though it's way more recent, like that probably stuff holds up way less than them just being pals.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, like, when I'm watching the Starsky and Hutch, you really do believe that the two have such a great chemistry together. Yeah. You believe that they're best friends, and you see why they're such good cops together.
Exactly, and I mean, this episode in particular, a lot of that plays into what happens. I mean, not just them being out there, but some things that happen a little bit later. So in the next scene, Cheryl's working in the lab, and Hutch is pacing around, and Starsky's kind of huddled in the corner. And now they've only got 7 hours. They still don't know where this Waddell guy is. And they're like, as soon as they're back on the streets, we'll turn that turkey. And then Cheryl gives Starsky some help shot to kind of help him out. And, and she says she went to try to talk to her dad, and he was in a faculty meeting, but he did offer some assistant to help out. And then Hobie tells them that Waddell's been dead for 4 days. He had a heart attack.
Yeah, that probably eliminates him.
Yes. But then a woman comes in, from these pharmacy supply places, and she's looking at some pictures. And meanwhile, while she's doing that, Starsky and Hutch are having a little moment again. Starsky's, if this was a cowboy movie, I'd give you my boots. And then they hold hands. And then the woman turns out recognizes Bellamy, the guy who had the broken leg, for coming in to get the materials to make a cast. So back to Bellamy's they go, and Bellamy, as you mentioned, sees them outside in the Torino.
Yeah.
And he's on the phone telling somebody he needs dough to get out of town. And then he heads up to the roof, and Starsky and Hutch come in. Starsky's barely holding on. Yeah. Tells him to stay in the apartment, and Hutch goes up.
Every director, especially of this era, loves a good chance to shoot down a staircase.
Yes.
Or winding shots of people climbing up the staircase.
Yeah. And on the roof, there's a bit of a shootout, but Bellamy, he's at least smart enough to know that Hutch can't kill him because he's got the information they need. Again, the amount that he was given in the full compound and all that. So Hutch is kind of huddling behind a skylight thing, and Bellamy's approaching him, and right before he shoots Hutch, Starsky shows up and shoots Bellamy and kills him, and then Starsky collapses. So it seems like they're out of luck. Yeah. Looking bad. Starsky's in the hospital. Hutch and Dobie are talking in the hallway, and Hutch feels like they forgot something. They've got less than 2 hours now. So they take Starsky upstairs. And Hutch, the more he thinks about it, he thinks that Bellamy is not smart enough or educated enough to have pulled this off on his own. And so he goes back to Bellamy's apartment and tears the place apart. He can't find anything, but finally the girlfriend or the wife doesn't know a name, but somebody from the university got him to do it. Which obviously, as you said, Lori figured out early.
Yeah, it was funny too, because it was like right. I don't know if it was the very first scene, but there was something, and Lori, just says, I'm starting to think it's her dad that was behind all this.
Yeah, and lo and behold,
and she was half joking, but she knows.
So Cheryl's visiting her dad, and they're talking, and Hutch is on his way there, and it turns out we get all this backstory finally that Cheryl's brother died. He was dealing drugs on campus. We find out a little bit later that he was also using, and then she turned him in, and her dad feels like that lit the fuse. And the brother he was working for Bellamy, and it turns out the dad hired Bellamy to kill Starsky and Hutch because Jerry died in their custody. Now the story is he was spaced out on drugs and grabbed Hutch's gun, and it went off by accident. His
mind had turned to soup, man. He was spaced out. Well, Hutch is very intense, but
yes.
he's keeping his cool, because at this point he realizes he's got to he's got to get the guy to talk. And even funny things were like, I just kind of like the fact that, like, I mean, it makes sense that he wouldn't just bust the door down this time, but it's like 2 a.m. or whatever. Right. Later than that, probably 3 a.m, and he just knocks on the door.
Yeah. Well, you still have to respect professors.
Yeah.
He's not some scuzzy drug dealer in a scuzzy apartment.
That's right. Otherwise, if you don't follow civility, he's no better than the perps he's chasing out there in Bay City every day.
Yeah. So Hutch also realizes that he must have another dose because he's going to kill Hutch too. And so the professor hands it over, and then we get the little tag.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to mention, I like this scene because it was the way the professor did it. It was well done. It was almost like he didn't actually hand it to him. He eased up enough that Hutch could take it from him.
Yeah.
Which is, and then he sort of like, collapsed and sort of sobbing and stuff. But it was kind of well done. It was just kind of showing like just the ambiguity and how, how torn he was, and he and just how helpless he felt at that moment.
Right.
It was a nice little moment.
Yeah, and Hutch showed a little empathy despite the situation.
Yeah.
So in the tag, which are often these comical bits, Starsky's walking in the hall of the police office. He's wearing sunglasses. He's a cane, but he's kind of doing a little soft shoe dance.
Yeah.
But then when he goes into the office, he acts like he's all weak. Dobie insists that he takes 2 weeks off, and right then Huggy Bear calls. And you think, oh, he's a little late, but he's finally got that information they wanted. But no, he's got Starsky's tickets for a 2-week Caribbean trip that has all the things he wants: the water, the ladies, tennis.
All those secretaries from New York go there.
Yes.
That's a detail I like. Like, oh, you think he would have said like flight attendants or something?
Right. Yeah.
There's a very specific bit of information he added.
Well, Starsky's from New York.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
He's probably like told Huggy about the secretaries.
Yeah.
And Hutch dumps his water. He got in a cup of water for Starsky, and he dumps it on Starsky's head. And it kind of freeze frames on that.
Yes. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
One could ask why Starsky didn't just, stay in the hospital and take his vacation without doing this, because he wouldn't have been...
Right.
Nobody would have batted an eye if he just asked for 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
But instead, I like to think, no, this is the relationship, is he had to go in and, bust their chops and see if he could get away with it and goof on him.
Right.
Because that's how things are with these guys.
Yeah, that's a sign of things are back to normal.
Yes.
He's got that sense of humor back.
And part of him might not even want to take a 2-week vacation, really.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Well, he likes to be out there fighting crime and stuff.
Yeah, he does like to be out there mixing it up.
He could probably use a few days, I think. But I'll bet by the end of that 2 weeks, he would have been restless anyway. And maybe he'll still take that vacation.
There's not enough turkeys here to turn over.
Yeah.
The idea of him playing tennis is pretty intriguing, too.
Yeah.
Like really aggressive tennis, I bet.
Yeah.
In one of those interviews I watched, Glazer said that the tags were their favorite parts. Because there was a little bit of improv and stuff in those.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah. This didn't happen in this one because, of course, he was sick the whole time. But I believe I told you, at least in the first season, like he's eating all the time.
Yeah.
That cracks me up.
Yeah, and I like just kind of like the back and forth he has over with Hutch about health food and starts eating junk, and and a comment about like those tag scenes, like to me it kind of shows how different television was back then. Nowadays, like these ones, we're watching these on streaming, right?
Yeah.
And it's more or less like all together. But back in the day, there was more of that separation because you'd have a commercial break after the the dramatic conclusion of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit more like these tags and this and other shows we've talked about. It's kind of like a cool down and stuff and transition to the next thing. And it probably played better back then with commercial breaks. That's an example of how people would use that commercial, and it would be an inessential scene, but it would serve its own purpose, and you could probably get away with having it be more, totally inconsistent with the rest of the show, I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
With that big commercial break before it.
Yeah, and of course, if that were on a show today, the credits would be playing over it in very tiny print.
Right.
But I don't know that, like a dramatic cop show probably doesn't have that kind of stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Chicago shows do that.
They well might, yes.
Or the FBI shows.
Right.
Or the NCIS shows.
Yes. The 911 shows.
Yes. Any of those. Criminal Minds always had a funny gag at the end.
Okay.
Wait, no. They're more reflective on the horror they had just seen. This is a good episode.
It is a good example. It's got the emphasis on their friendship. It also shows them doing police work. Mm-hmm. And that's, you do see that a lot in this show. And some of it was just them looking through files, but they were doing it in a very intense way, of course, as they can do. But, the show does depict the guys doing police work. And a lot of it just happens to be busting heads and breaking down doors, things like that.
Right. Car chases.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I had in my mind what the four basic storylines of Starsky and Hutch are. One is that someone's trying to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could, maybe a sub one of that is someone is trying to kill Adobe or Huggy.
Yeah.
They go undercover in some specific situation, like wrestling.
Right. An elaborate undercover, like an extended undercover situation.
Right. I don't know. Maybe there are only two.
Well, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of another one.
I've seen several where, okay.
Oh, they have a girlfriend
Yeah.
who's either in jeopardy or dies or something like that. And,
right.
What you were going to say? Several.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay,
actually.
yeah.
Or I was actually thinking of like a female who drives a wedge between them.
Yes, yeah.
Which happens several times.
Right. That's about it. But,
yeah. And some episodes combine all of these.
Yes. And apparently more than one combines or has deranged Vietnam vets.
Yeah, that's right. And there's an early season 1 episode where Hutch is actually shot up with H.
Oh, yeah.
With that junk.
That's right.
He's got they shot him up with that junk. And, he gets strung out.
Yeah.
And it's almost a reverse of this. I mean, this is a different situation, obviously, but it's sort of like the roles are a little bit reversed as, Starsky tries to help him.
Yes.
An incapacitated Hutch. And by the way, one thing I love, for some reason, it just cracks me up when the characters are referred to by their first names.
So
Dave Starsky just seems weird to me.
What is Hutch's first name?
Ken.
It is Ken. I was thinking it was Ken.
Yeah.
Just as a joke. Yeah.
Yeah, but it just seems unnatural. So it stands out.
Of course, his name is Hutchinson.
Yeah.
Ken Hutchinson. So he's even shortened to Hutch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a sign like Dobie calls Starsky Dave.
Yeah.
Starsky makes a note of that. Like, it must be serious. He's calling me Dave.
Yeah. I think even their girlfriends usually just call them Starsky and Hutch.
Sure. They probably don't even reveal their first names until like the 5th date.
No, that's right. Well, that's how they can go undercover so much. They leave that doubt because people don't know their first names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it the Starsky and Hutch? I don't know. Said his name is Dave. That doesn't seem right.
And I really like, Paul Michael Glaser is a really interesting TV actor, especially.
Yes. Yeah.
The two of them are great together, but there's just something about Starsky. He's always interesting to watch.
Yes.
Like in just every episode.
Yeah. I'm definitely more a Starsky fan than a Hutch fan. But
yeah.
Nothing against David Soul.
No. But
he's fine, and of course he had his singing career. And does he ever sing on episodes?
I think I don't remember offhand. I think they had to have done it later.
The weirdest thing I learned about him was his masked singer thing. Do you know about this?
No.
His initial success as an entertainer in the mid '60s was.
Oh yes.
David
Soul.
Yes,
I thought you were talking about the recent show.
No. He wore a mask and sang songs about wearing a mask, and got on a lot of talk shows and stuff, and had some hits. And then as soon as he got a big deal, and took off the mask, nobody cared anymore.
Yeah.
What an odd.
That is odd.
Just career move.
Because, I for a long time, I assumed that he was an actor that dabbled in singing.
Yeah.
That was like just sort of a vanity project. But actually, to think that he first got into it as a singer.
Yes, I think he was a singer who dabbled in acting.
Yeah.
I just lived in England for years. I've done acting over there. Which I feel like Starsky and Hutch was huge over there, too. Just thinking about how many times it gets referenced in some of these British shows we watch.
Yeah. I think they had, comic books and stuff over there.
Yeah. Those annuals or something.
Yeah. And he was, David Soul was in the Casablanca series, I think that was on NBC.
Oh, yeah.
Did some bad things. Was plagued by alcohol issues, and hopefully he's in a better situation now. And tragedy struck Paul Michael Glaser, of course.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, and contracting AIDS as a result of a blood transfusion. It's just interesting that these two linked in this show. It really sort of fascinates me. We say this a lot, but Starsky and Hutch is really one that I do want to watch a lot more of. I've enjoyed seeing it, and I think one thing that's a really good sign is we were joking about sort of the limited number of basic plots, but when we were going through and picking episodes to watch and just what to pick, just how many episodes I wanted to see.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. Or, I got to see that. And, granted, I've been cherry picking a lot of the best episodes, but just about every one I've seen is delivered on some level. I've been satisfied by it.
I agree. And, the other storyline is where they're separated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of them has to rescue someone from something, another one from some situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely now in my head as another 70s like detective or cop show to watch if I'm in the mood for that.
Yeah, and it's a good window into a certain time. I'm not saying it's a docuseries, but it shows you what television was like and how, 70s TV depicted, crime and things like that. And also, yeah, in some ways, it explored social issues and it got into notions of masculinity at the time and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. And we'll come back to this again. It was really super violent. A lot of episodes are, gunplay. The fights some of the fight scenes are brutal. It has, like, as you said, like really edgy material and situations. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I still don't know why they would make toys of this, but I wish I had more of them. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Or, those customs. I guess those are probably one of a kind.
Yeah.
And, we didn't talk about Huggy a lot, but I guess an important part of the show. People loved him. They attempted a spin-off of him, right? Or there's a backdoor pilot episode.
That's right, yeah, with him being like a private investigator or something. Yeah, I have not seen that. I'm curious about that, but I think it probably works best just the way it is. I mean, if you don't, it's best to have him come on, in a scene or two and not to have to think too much and give him the occasional spotlight episode each season. But other than that, just have him, he's kind of like the link to like the blaxploitation movies of the 70s and he works in that role, but I wouldn't do a whole thing around him.
All right. Well, I'm going on a 2-week vacation.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I already got it booked. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't know.
You didn't ask me or anything?
I guess I should have. Yeah.
I kind of thought we were in this together, for the long haul.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, thanks again to David for suggesting or inspiring us a little bit to get on this one. Again, it was on the big board, but we hadn't gotten around to it. Glad we did. If you have suggestions, you can leave them at our Facebook group if you're part of that, or join that, or you can drop us an email at mailbag@battleofthenetworkshows.com.
That's right. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep. We're nearing the end of season 11, but we'll have to start thinking about season 12 soon.
Yep. As many shows as we've talked about, there's so much more out there, and we're always interested to hear what you guys would like to see us cover.
Yeah. So we promise no violence in season 12.
We do?
Well, between us.
Okay, yeah.
We might still discuss shows that contain violence.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
This episode brought to you by Striped Tomatoes. This episode also brought to you by David Soul Sings the Bay City Rollers. This episode also brought to you by Huggy Bear's Travel Agency. He's got what you need. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.